the beginning of Egyptian myths. Imagine yourself lying down, your eyes getting heavy, and slowly we drift back, thousands and thousands of years ago, to the banks of the great Nile River. The Nile was not just a river. For the people of ancient Egypt, it was life itself. Every year the Nile would rise and flood the land, leaving behind rich, dark soil. Crops would grow, villages would thrive. Without the Nile, Egypt would have been nothing but desert. With the Nile, Egypt became a cradle of civilization. But long before there were kings, long before there were pyramids, the Egyptians told stories. These stories were not just for entertainment. They were gentle explanations for life's biggest questions. Where did the world come from? Why does the sun rise every morning? What happens when we die? The answers, the Egyptians believed, were found in their myths. The stillness before creation. The myths begin with stillness. Before there was land, before there was sky, before even the sun, there was only a dark, endless sea. The Egyptians called this sea Nun. Nun was not water you could drink. It was not water you could swim in. Nun was the great, formless, timeless ocean of nothingness. In Nun there was no light, no sound, no movement, just a vast silence, stretching on forever. And yet, within this silence, life was waiting. The Egyptians imagined that out of this endless water, the very first hill of land slowly rose up, a small mound just above the surface, like an island in the middle of infinity. This first land was sacred. It was the beginning of the world. And on this first hill, the first god appeared. The first god, Atum. The god's name was Atum. He was the self-created one. No mother, no father, no beginning. He simply came into being, all on his own, standing on that first mound of earth. Atum looked out over the endless waters of Nun. There was no one else. No sky, no stars, no people, only silence. Atum was alone, but he carried within him the power of creation. To end his loneliness, Atum created two children. With his divine power, he brought forth Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. With air and moisture, the first balance of the universe was formed. The story is slow and simple. Air and moisture. Breathing and water. The things we need most to survive. Shu and Tefnut together. Shu and Tefnut drifted away from Atum, exploring the dark waters of Nun. For a time, they were lost in the endless night. Atum, worried for them, sent out his eye, a powerful, glowing eye that searched until it found Shu and Tefnut and brought them back. When they returned, Atum wept tears of joy. From those tears, the first human beings were born. And so, the Egyptians said, humanity itself came from the god's deep feeling, from his sorrow and joy. The birth of earth and sky, Shu and Tefnut gave birth to the next pair of gods, Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Geb lay beneath as the land. Nut arched high above as the heavens. At first, they were locked in a loving embrace, pressed so close together that there was no space between earth and sky. But life could not grow this way, so Shu, their father, separated them, lifting Nut high above and pushing Geb down below. Now there was room for the world, space for air, space for people, space for all living things. From the laughter of Nut came the stars. From the body of Geb came mountains and valleys. Slowly, the shape of the world emerged. The cosmic family. Now there were 9 gods, a sacred group the Egyptians called the Ennead. Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, and their children who would soon follow. Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. These 9 were the foundation of Egyptian mythology. Every story, every prayer, every temple could trace its roots back to them. And yet, at the beginning, it was still simple. Water, air, moisture, earth, and sky. The rhythm of the Nile. To the Egyptians, these stories were not just abstract tales. They saw them every day in the world around them. The rising of the sun each morning reminded them of Atum emerging from noon. The separation of earth and sky was reflected in the wide open spaces of their land. The annual flooding of the Nile was connected to the tears of the gods, bringing life to the soil. It was all part of a cosmic order, something the Egyptians called Ma'at, truth, balance, harmony. To live well was to live in Ma'at, to be in tune with the natural flow of the universe. A quiet beginning. And so, in this first chapter of Egyptian mythology, we have the slow unfolding of creation. Nothing rushed, nothing hurried. From still waters came land. From loneliness came family. From tears came humankind. It is a story of beginnings, a story of balance. And like all good bedtime stories, it begins in silence and ends in peace. As you imagine the dark waters of Nun stretching endlessly, and the first rays of light rising on that tiny hill of creation, you can almost feel yourself drifting, slowly, gently, into a calmer state, the way the Egyptians must have felt, telling this story by the soft glow of a lamp, listening to the quiet breath of the Nile outside their homes. The first gods, Adam and creation. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the endless dark waters of Nun, silent, still, eternal. And upon that silence, a single hill of earth rises. On this sacred mound, the first god appeared, Adam. Adam was different from every god who would come after. He had no parents. He had no birth. He simply came into being, standing tall above the waters, filled with the power of creation, alone but not powerless, silent but waiting. The Egyptians told this story slowly, with deep reverence, because it was not just about gods, it was about the beginning of all things. The loneliness of Atum. Atum stood on the first land, gazing at the endless waters of Nun. The silence was heavy. He was the only being in existence. There was no sky, no earth, no stars, no people, only the soft lapping of the primeval waters, stretching endlessly in every direction. But within Atum was the seed of all life. He carried the power to create. And from his deep loneliness came his first act of creation. The Egyptians explained it in many ways. Some said Atum breathed life into the void. Some said he spoke the first words. Others whispered that he fashioned his children from his own body. The details differ, but the heart of the story is the same. From one came two. Shu and Tefnut Atum created Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, air and water, breath and dew. Together, they were the first balance of the world. Shu, with his invisible but ever-present touch, brought lightness and space. Tefnut, with her gentle, nourishing presence, brought coolness and dampness. Between them, life could begin to grow. The Egyptians imagined them as a pair, moving together through the dark waters, exploring the world that did not yet exist. But as they wandered, they became lost in the vastness of Nun. Atum felt their absence. His children were gone. The world was silent once more. The search for the children. Atum longed for Shu and Tefnut. He missed them so deeply that he sent out a part of himself to find them. This was no ordinary search. He sent forth his eye, a glowing, radiant force of divine sight. The eye searched endlessly, cutting through the shadows of Nun, until finally it found Shu and Tefnut and brought them safely back to their father. When Atum saw them again, his heart overflowed with joy. His tears fell upon the earth. And from those tears, the Egyptians said, the first human beings were born. Humans were born from the god's grief, from his longing and his joy. Not from power, not from lightning, not from thunder, but from tears. A gentle, emotional beginning to humanity, the next generation. With Shu and Tefnut restored, creation could continue. Together they gave birth to Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Now the world was taking shape. Geb became the land, solid, fertile, strong. Nut became the heavens, vast, arched, filled with stars. But at first, Geb and Nut clung tightly together, wrapped in an embrace. There was no space between them, no room for air, no room for people, no room for life. So Shu, the god of air, stepped in. Gently but firmly, he pushed Nut upward, holding her aloft as the sky. Geb remained below as the earth, and between them came the space where all life could exist. This moment was the true shaping of the cosmos, the heavens above, the earth below, and the air between them. The first balance. The Egyptians saw this story not just as myth, but as truth. Every day when they looked at the sky, they imagined Nut arching overhead, her body studded with stars. Every time they stood upon the ground, they felt Geb beneath their feet, and every breath they took was Shu, the air, holding sky and earth apart. Creation was not chaos. Creation was balance. Adam had begun the process, but it was his children and grandchildren who gave the world its form. Air, water, earth, and sky. Slowly, carefully, the world became complete. The first 9 gods. By now the family of gods had grown: Adam, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut. Soon the children of Geb and Nut would arrive: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Together these 9 gods made up what the Egyptians called the Ennead of Heliopolis. Heliopolis, the city of the sun, was one of the most sacred cities of ancient Egypt. Priests there told and retold these myths, chanting them, singing them, whispering them into the ears of kings. The Ennead was the foundation of religion, the first divine family, the map of creation itself. The gentle rhythm. What makes these stories so peaceful is their rhythm. They are not fast. They do not rush. Creation does not happen in a single burst of fire or lightning. It unfolds slowly, step by step, the way the Nile flows, the way the sun rises, the way the seasons turn. First, silence. Then, a mound of land. Then, one god. Then, 2 children. Then, their children. With each generation, the world grows more complete. The Egyptians lived their lives by rhythms. Of the river, of the sun, of the stars. Their myths reflected that same patience, that same gentle unfolding. A universe of family. In these myths, the universe is not built from stone or fire. It is built from family. A lonely god, a pair of children, a reunion, a birth. The world itself is shaped by love, by loss, by longing, by joy. Adam's tears became humanity. Shu's breath became space. Nut's laughter became stars. Geb's body became the land. Each part of creation carried emotion, feeling, story. The Egyptians believed that to live in this world was to live inside the divine family. The gods were not distant. They were present in every breath, every drop of water, every patch of soil. The quiet lesson. And so, part 2 of this sleepy journey reminds us that the first gods were not warriors, not destroyers, not thunderers. They were creators, parents and children, lovers and companions. Through them, balance emerged. Through them, life became possible. As you picture Adam standing alone on that first mound of land, as you picture Shu lifting the sky, and Geb lying below as the earth, as you imagine Nut stretched overhead, glittering with stars, you can almost feel the calm order of the universe settling around you. A universe where everything has its place. A universe born from silence and made to last forever. Earth and sky, Geb and Nut. Picture a world still new, still forming. The waters of Nun have given rise to land. The first god, Adam, has created children, and those children have created more. The family of gods grows. And now, 2 new beings enter the story. 2 who will shape the very fabric of existence. Their names are Geb and Nut. Geb and Nut are born from Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, came this powerful pair. Geb was the god of the earth, firm, solid, rich and fertile. Nut was the goddess of the sky, vast, mysterious, and filled with stars. Together they were not just gods. They were the world itself. When people touched the soil, they touched Geb. When they looked at the heavens, they saw Nut. But in the beginning, Geb and Nut were not separated. They were locked tightly together in a deep embrace. Geb pressed upward, Nut pressed downward, and between them there was no space, no breath, no room for life to move. The problem of creation. Life could not grow while Geb and Nut clung to one another. Plants could not stretch, animals could not breathe, humans could not live. The world was too closed, too tight. Adam, the first god, looked upon this situation and knew that something had to change. He commanded Shu, the god of air, to act. Shu's task. Gently, but with great strength, Shu placed his hands beneath Nut and began to lift her. Slowly, carefully, he raised her high, arching her body above Geb. Geb remained below, solid and steady, while Nut curved above him, her body stretching like a dome. And thus, the sky was lifted. For the first time, there was space between earth and heaven. The air flowed freely. Light and wind could move. Plants could grow. Animals could live. The Egyptians saw this separation as the moment when the world truly became livable. The eternal positions. From then on, Geb lay below as the land. Mountains were his bones, valleys his skin, fertile fields his flesh. Nut stretched high above, her body glittering with stars. Every night she swallowed the sun, and every morning she gave birth to it again. Between them was Shu, the god of air, always holding them apart, always keeping balance. Without Shu, sky and earth would fall back into their embrace, and the world would end. It was a delicate balance, but it was eternal. Geb and Nut's children. Even separated, Geb and Nut's love remained strong. And from their union came 4 children who would shape the destiny of Egypt forever. Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Each one of these gods carried a role that would define myth and religion. Osiris would become the ruler of the afterlife. Isis would be the great mother and healer. Seth would be the god of chaos and storms. Nephthys would be the guardian of the dead. The story of these 4 children is the next great chapter of Egyptian mythology, but it all begins with the love of earth and sky, Geb and Nut, the symbolism of Geb. For the Egyptians, Geb was more than just the land beneath their feet. He was fertility itself. Farmers prayed to him when they sowed seeds. His laughter was said to cause earthquakes. His body was the ground that grew food, that supported temples, that gave stability. Geb was not cold stone. He was living earth, filled with richness, always ready to nourish life. The symbolism of Nut, meanwhile, was the eternal sky. She arched overhead like a great mother, her body covered in stars. To the Egyptians, the night sky was not just a collection of lights. It was the living body of a goddess. Nut was also the keeper of time. She swallowed the sun each evening, carried it through her body during the night, and gave birth to it at dawn. Day after day, night after night, she renewed the world. Nut was the cycle of time, the endless rhythm that gave life its pattern. Daily life reflections. When Egyptians lay on the ground at night looking upward, they saw Nut. When they planted seeds in the soil, they touched Geb. Their myths were not separate from their lives. They were woven into the very act of breathing, eating, and living. For them, the universe was a family, and that family was all around them. Balance and harmony. The story of Geb and Nut is a story of balance. At first, they were too close, and life could not exist. Then they were separated by Shu, and harmony was created. The Egyptians believed that this balance, between sky and earth, between love and distance, was essential for life. It was a gentle reminder that sometimes, even love needs space. Even closeness must be balanced with distance. In that balance, life finds its place. A slow cosmic picture. So imagine it now. Geb, green and brown, lying below as the land. Nut, deep blue and filled with golden stars, stretching above. Shu, tall and steady, holding the sky aloft, his arms raised forever. The scene is quiet, eternal. peaceful. This was the universe to the Egyptians. Not random, not chaotic, but ordered, shaped, and filled with meaning. The quiet ending. As you picture Geb and Nut, held apart by Shu, you might feel the calm order of their story settling around you. The earth below you, firm and steady. The sky above you, vast and protective. The air between them filling your lungs gently. In this way, the Egyptians told not just a myth, but a lullaby of existence. And so, the story of Geb and Nut closes with peace. The heavens above, the earth below, and the balance of air in between, just as it has been for thousands of years, and just as it will be long after we are gone. The divine family, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. The world was now set in place. The sky stretched above as Nut. The earth lay firm below as Geb. The air, Shu, kept them apart. And from their union came 4 children, 4 divine beings whose stories would shape the entire mythology of Egypt. They were Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Each one carried a different role. Each one carried a destiny. Together, they formed the divine family at the very heart of Egyptian myth. The birth of 4 siblings. The ancient Egyptians imagined Nut, the sky goddess, giving birth to these children, one after the other. Each child represented not just a person, but an idea, a part of the world, a force of life and death. They were more than siblings, they were symbols. Osiris, the gentle king. The firstborn was Osiris. To the Egyptians, Osiris was the god of fertility, vegetation, and later, of the afterlife. He was kind, wise, and just. In myth, he ruled Egypt as the first king, teaching people how to farm, how to live with order, and how to honor the gods. Osiris was not a warrior. He was a bringer of life, a restorer of balance. He was gentle, patient, filled with wisdom. People loved him, and gods respected him. But as with all myths, where there is light, there must also be shadow. Isis, the devoted queen. The second child was Isis, the sister and later the wife of Osiris. Isis became one of the most beloved goddesses in all of Egyptian religion. She was the goddess of magic, healing, and protection. Isis was patient, clever, and endlessly loyal. She was known for her devotion, not only to Osiris but also to humanity. She protected children, guarded the weak, and helped the grieving. Her magic was so great that even the most powerful gods respected it. Isis was not loud or fierce. She was quiet strength, a steady flame in the darkness. Seth, the wild storm. The third child was Seth. Unlike his siblings, Seth represented chaos, violence, and disorder. He was the god of storms, deserts, and wild places. His appearance was strange and frightening, often shown with the head of an unrecognizable beast, part dog, part donkey, part something unknown. Seth was strong, powerful, and ambitious, but he was also jealous. He did not like to be in the shadow of Osiris, his gentle brother. He did not like the calm harmony that Osiris represented. Seth longed for power, for chaos, for change. In him, we see the shadow side of life, the storms, the disasters, the moments of destruction. Nephthys, the silent protector. The fourth child was Nephthys. She is less famous than her siblings, but her role was still important. Nephthys was the goddess of dusk, of protection, and of mourning. She was the shadow that balances the light. Nephthys was often seen as the quieter sister, a helper in rituals of death and rebirth. She stood beside Isis in funerary rites, helping souls find their way to Osiris in the afterlife. Though less dramatic than her siblings, Nephthys was steady, loyal, and essential. The family together, and so we have the 4, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Together they formed a divine family filled with love, rivalry, loyalty, and betrayal. Osiris and Isis were joined as husband and wife. Seth and Nephthys were also paired. But the bonds of this family were not peaceful. Tensions simmered beneath the surface. The Egyptians understood that families, even divine ones, are filled with both harmony and conflict. And in the story of these siblings, we see the seeds of one of the most famous myths of all time, the murder of Osiris, the grief of Isis, and the vengeance of Horus. Symbolism of the siblings. Each sibling represented a part of existence. Osiris was life, order, and rebirth. Isis was love, loyalty, and magic. Seth was chaos, destruction, and ambition. Nephthys was mourning, protection, and transition. Together they reflected the full cycle of life: growth and decay, order and chaos, light and shadow. The Egyptians believed that to understand the world, you needed all of them. The seeds of conflict. Though Osiris was loved and Isis was devoted, Seth's jealousy grew. He looked at his brother and saw a ruler who had everything: respect, power, and love. Seth wanted that for himself. The bond of the siblings was beginning to strain. Nephthys, caught in the middle, stood quietly, neither as bright as Isis nor as dark as Seth. She remained a shadow, loyal yet overlooked. And so, slowly, the stage was set. A family of gods, a world of balance and order, and the whisper of chaos, waiting to break through. A slow reflection. The Egyptians told these stories in temples, in homes, in whispers by the Nile. Parents told children about Osiris and Isis as models of love and devotion. They warned them about Seth, the god of storms, whose anger could destroy. They honored Nephthys, the quiet one, who stood by in times of sorrow. It was more than myth. It was life. For in every family there is kindness and jealousy, loyalty and rivalry, love and grief. The divine family reflected the human family. Closing the chapter. As you picture them now, Osiris, gentle and wise; Isis, graceful and strong; Seth, fierce and brooding; Nephthys, silent and watchful, you can feel the balance of forces at play. The divine family was not perfect. It was full of love and full of conflict. But it was through their stories that the Egyptians understood the cycle of life and death. This is the quiet power of Egyptian myth, to take the mysteries of the universe and place them into a family, a story, a rhythm that feels close, familiar, and eternal. And so the chapter closes. 4 siblings, bound together by love and rivalry. A family that would shape the fate of gods and humans alike. The sky goddess Nut, and the separation of earth and sky. Long ago, when the world was still very young, there was no true boundary between the heavens above and the earth below. The sky goddess Nut and the earth god Geb were locked in a tight embrace. They loved each other deeply, so much so that they were always together, holding each other without a gap between them. Because of this closeness, the world was dark, and there was no space for life to grow. The sun god Ra grew frustrated. He wanted light to shine upon the earth. He wanted space where humans and creatures could live, and he wanted time to begin flowing in a proper cycle. Ra declared that Nut and Geb must be separated, but this was no simple task. Their love bound them together so strongly that none of the other gods could pull them apart. It was then that Shu, the god of air, stepped forward. Shu had the strength of the winds and the space between breaths. Using all his power, Shu forced himself between Nut and Geb. With great effort, he lifted Nut high above, arching her body to form the vast sky, while Geb stretched out below to form the green earth. From that moment on, Nut became the dome of the heavens, her dark body scattered with shining stars, while Geb became the fertile land with rivers, mountains, and valleys. Though they were separated, their love did not vanish. Every morning, Nut would allow the sun to rise from her eastern horizon and travel across her body until it set in the west. Every night, she would swallow the sun and carry it through her belly, only to give birth to it again at dawn. This endless cycle kept Ra's light moving and gave the world both day and night. Nut also longed to be reunited with Geb. Her tears often fell from the heavens and landed upon the earth as rain. Geb, in return, sent up the green grass, the tall trees, and the growing crops to reach toward her, showing that he still cared. Though apart, their love shaped the world, creating the balance of sky above and earth below. But Nut's story did not end there. Ra feared that her children might become too powerful and threaten his reign as the sun god. When he learned that Nut was destined to give birth to great gods, he placed a curse upon her. She would not be allowed to bear children on any day of the year. This curse filled Nut with sorrow, for she longed to bring new life into the world. Nut also longed to be reunited with Geb. Her tears often fell from the heavens and landed upon the earth as rain. Geb, in return, sent up the green grass, the tall trees, and the growing crops to reach toward her, showing that he still cared. Though apart, their love shaped the world, creating the balance of sky above and earth below. But Nut's story did not end there. Ra feared that her children might become too powerful and threaten his reign as the sun god. When he learned that Nut was destined to give birth to great gods, he placed a curse upon her. She would not be allowed to bear children on any day of the year. This curse filled Nut with sorrow, for she longed to bring new life into the world. Yet Nut was clever and sought help. She turned to Thoth, the wise god of wisdom and writing. Thoth challenged the moon to a game of chance. Through his cleverness, Thoth won enough moonlight to create 5 extra days outside the normal 360-day year. These were called the epigomenal days, and they existed beyond Ra's curse. On these days, Nut gave birth to some of the most important gods of Egypt: Osiris, Isis, Seth, Nephthys, and Horus the Elder. With their births, the future of Egyptian mythology was set into motion. Osiris would become the god of the afterlife, Isis the goddess of magic and love, Seth the god of chaos and storms, and Nephthys the goddess of protection and night. Their stories would continue to shape the myths of Egypt for centuries to come. The tale of Nut and Geb reminds us that even separation cannot destroy love. It also shows how the struggles of the gods brought about the world as humans knew it: the heavens above, the fertile earth below, the rhythm of day and night, and the flow of time itself. And so when you look up at the night sky and see the stars shining, you are seeing Nut's body stretched above you. When you feel the ground beneath your feet, that is Geb supporting you. Their eternal longing still surrounds us, a quiet love story that holds the world together. The birth of Osiris and the rise of a just king. On the first of the 5 sacred days created by Thoth, Nut gave birth to Osiris. From the moment he was born, the other gods could sense that Osiris carried a special destiny. He grew into a wise and noble figure, tall and graceful, with eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and strength. His presence brought calm, and wherever he went, people felt a sense of order and fairness. Osiris did not remain among the gods alone. According to myth, he chose to walk among humans, for he loved the earth that his father Geb had formed. At that time, the world of men was wild. People fought constantly. There was no proper food cultivation, and no clear rules for living together peacefully. Osiris sought to change this. He taught humanity how to grow crops, especially wheat and barley, which became the foundation of bread and beer, 2 of the most sacred foods in Egyptian culture. He showed them how to plant seeds, tend to the soil, and harvest the bounty of the earth. He taught them how to make laws, so that justice could rule instead of violence. People began to live in peace, guided by his wisdom. It was during these times that Osiris became king of Egypt. His reign was remembered as a golden age, a time of harmony and prosperity. His queen was Isis, his sister and companion, who was beloved for her magical powers and deep compassion. Together they ruled with fairness. Isis protected the people with her enchantments, while Osiris brought them knowledge and structure. Yet not everyone rejoiced in Osiris's greatness. His brother Seth, the god of chaos, looked upon him with jealousy and resentment. Where Osiris brought order, Seth preferred disorder. Where Osiris brought peace, Seth thrived on conflict. Seth believed that he, not Osiris, should be king. But Osiris's wisdom and popularity were too great for Seth to challenge openly, at least for now. As Osiris continued to rule, his teachings spread across the land. He did not stay bound to Egypt alone. Myths tell that he traveled far and wide, bringing civilization to other peoples, teaching them agriculture, laws, and respect for the gods. He never forced his rule, but instead inspired others by example. Wherever Osiris went, he left behind the memory of a just and noble king. When he finally returned to Egypt, he found his kingdom thriving under the care of Isis. Together, they were admired as the perfect rulers, embodying balance, love, and order. The people sang praises to them, and even the gods looked upon their reign with approval. But beneath the joy, Seth's envy burned hotter. He plotted in secret, waiting for the moment when he could strike against his brother. Still, for a time, Osiris's reign remained unbroken. His name became a symbol of goodness and justice, and the people believed that as long as he ruled, Egypt would flourish. The bond between Osiris and Isis grew deeper as well, their love serving as a guiding light for their people. The story of Osiris's rise is one of hope and prosperity, but like all myths, it also carries a shadow. For in the distance, Seth was preparing his betrayal, a betrayal that would change the destiny of gods and men forever. And so the tale leaves us here. Osiris, the great and noble king, ruling with fairness beside Isis, unaware that his brother's jealousy would soon shatter the peace of the world. Seth's betrayal and the tragic death of Osiris. The reign of Osiris was a time of balance and peace, but shadows always linger when jealousy takes root. Seth, the brother of Osiris, could no longer bear to see his sibling honored by gods and mortals alike. His envy grew day by day, hardening into hatred. Seth was not only jealous of Osiris's crown, but also of the love and respect Osiris inspired. Where Osiris brought order, Seth thrived in chaos. He began to scheme. Seth knew he could not defeat Osiris in open combat, for Osiris was admired and protected by Isis. Instead, he devised a plan that was both clever and cruel. He would use trickery to destroy his brother. Seth crafted a magnificent chest, an ornate box made of fine cedar wood, overlaid with gold and precious stones. It was no ordinary chest. Seth had secretly measured Osiris's body so that the chest would fit him perfectly, as if it were made just for him. To others, it appeared to be a lavish gift, but in truth, it was a trap. One evening, Seth held a grand banquet and invited Osiris, Isis, and many nobles of Egypt. Music filled the hall, wine flowed freely, and laughter echoed through the night. Seth was charming, his smile hiding the venom in his heart. At the height of the feast, he presented the beautiful chest before all the guests. "Behold this marvelous gift," Seth declared. "I will give it to whomever among you can fit inside it perfectly." Curiosity filled the room. One by one, guests tried to lie down inside the chest, but none fit. Some were too short, others too tall, and all failed. At last, Seth turned to his brother with feigned innocence. "Surely, Osiris, our noble king, should try," he said. Unaware of the danger, Osiris agreed. He lay down inside the chest, and as expected, he fit perfectly. In that instant, Seth slammed the lid shut. With the help of his followers, he nailed it down and sealed it with molten lead, trapping Osiris inside. The guests gasped in horror, but before anyone could act, Seth and his men lifted the chest and carried it out of the hall. With cruel laughter, they threw it into the Nile River. The waters carried Osiris away, while Seth declared himself the rightful king of Egypt. Isis was devastated. She wept bitterly, her cries echoing through the land. The people mourned as well, for their beloved king had vanished. Yet Isis did not give in to despair. She vowed to find her husband, no matter where the Nile had carried him. With her unmatched determination and magic, she set out on a long and sorrowful journey. Meanwhile, Osiris drifted within the sealed chest, helpless and silent. The river carried him northward, out of Egypt, and across the seas. Eventually, the chest came to rest in the land of Byblos, where it lodged within the trunk of a great tamarisk tree. Over time, the tree grew around it, enclosing the chest within its bark, as though nature itself wished to protect the fallen king. But in Egypt, chaos spread. Seth claimed the throne, ruling with cruelty and violence. He had no care for justice, no patience for peace. The balance that Osiris had created began to crumble, and the world fell once more into disorder. This moment, the betrayal of Osiris, is one of the most tragic and famous episodes in Egyptian mythology. It shows the eternal struggle between order and chaos, love and jealousy, life and death. Though Osiris was gone, his story was far from over. For Isis's love was strong, and she would not rest until she brought her husband back. And so, the tale pauses here. Seth, triumphant but false. Osiris trapped within the tamarisk tree, and Isis beginning her quest of sorrow and devotion. Isis's search and the resurrection of Osiris. The Nile no longer sang with joy after the death of Osiris. The fields grew dry and the people wept, for their king, who had taught them how to farm and live in peace, was gone. Yet one heart burned with unshakable love, the heart of Isis. She would not allow death or even the schemes of Seth to take her husband away forever. Isis began her quest with tireless determination. Disguising herself as a wandering woman, she traveled across Egypt, asking every villager, every boatman, and every traveler if they had seen the golden chest. Her journey was long and filled with sorrow, yet she never faltered. At last, whispers reached her ears of a miraculous tree in the city of Byblos. The people there spoke of a great tamarisk tree that had grown around a strange wooden chest, so sacred that the local king had ordered it cut down and used as a pillar in his palace. Isis knew immediately. This was the resting place of Osiris. She disguised herself once again, this time as a nursemaid, and entered the service of the queen of Byblos. With kindness and gentle care, she tended to the queen's children, earning the family's trust. But her true purpose was always the same: to stay close to the pillar that held her husband's body. At night, when the palace slept, Isis would sit near the tamarisk pillar and weep softly, her tears carrying the weight of her love and loss. Her mourning was so deep that even the stone walls seemed to listen. Finally, moved by her devotion, Isis revealed her divine nature to the queen. She told her of Osiris and of the betrayal by Seth. The queen, filled with compassion, allowed Isis to take the chest back to Egypt. With reverence, Isis freed Osiris's body from the pillar and carried him away, hiding him in the marshes of the Nile Delta. There, she prepared her magic, knowing that death could not easily be undone. With chants and sacred spells, Isis began the work of resurrection. She called upon Thoth, the wise god of knowledge, to guide her. She invoked Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, to help preserve Osiris's body. Together, they performed the first rites of mummification, binding his body with linen and protecting it with sacred amulets. But Isis's magic was more powerful than ritual alone. Through her love and devotion, she breathed life into Osiris once again. For a brief time, Osiris returned to the world of the living. Their reunion was tender and filled with both joy and sorrow. From their union during this sacred moment, Isis conceived a child, the future god Horus. Yet Osiris could not remain among the living forever. Though revived by magic, he was no longer meant for the world of sunlight. Instead, he descended to the underworld, becoming the ruler of the Duat, the realm of the dead. There, he would preside as judge of souls, ensuring that justice and order remained even beyond death. Thus, Osiris did not vanish into nothingness. He became eternal, the god of the afterlife, worshipped by Egyptians for thousands of years. His story was no longer only about tragedy, but also about transformation, about the power of love, rebirth, and the promise of life after death. But Seth's reign was not yet over. Though Osiris now ruled the underworld, Seth remained king on earth, his cruelty unchecked. Isis, however, carried within her womb the hope of Egypt. Her son Horus would one day challenge Seth and seek justice for his father's murder. And so, the myth continues. Osiris lives as lord of the underworld. Isis waits with faith and patience, and the child Horus grows in secret, destined to battle his uncle and restore the rightful balance to Egypt. The birth of Horus and the hidden childhood. The winds of the Nile carried whispers of hope. Though Osiris now ruled the underworld, his legacy was not extinguished. From the deep grief and unwavering love of Isis, a child was born, a child destined to change Egypt's fate. His name was Horus. Horus was no ordinary infant. He was the son of Osiris and Isis, carrying within him both the strength of his father and the magic of his mother. Yet his birth was not accompanied by grand celebrations. Instead, it was hidden in secrecy, for Seth still ruled the land, and should he discover the boy, he would not hesitate to destroy him. Isis gave birth to Horus in the swamps of the Nile Delta, far from palaces and temples. The reeds whispered gently as they concealed mother and child, creating a natural cradle of protection. There the goddess nurtured her son in quiet devotion, cradling him in her arms as the stars looked down with silent promise. But even in hiding, dangers surrounded them. The marshes teemed with scorpions, snakes, and lurking threats. Seth's spies roamed the land, searching for any sign of Isis and the mysterious child. To protect her son, Isis called upon 7 magical scorpions, loyal guardians who accompanied her wherever she went. Their stings were venomous, their loyalty unshakable, and their presence a warning to any who dared threaten the divine mother and her child. Isis wandered from village to village disguised as a simple woman, seeking food and shelter while nursing her child. Sometimes the people were kind, offering bread and water. Other times, fear made them turn her away, unaware of the sacred life she carried. When Horus fell ill or was bitten by creatures of the marsh, Isis sang spells of healing, whispering sacred words that restored him. Her magic, born of love and sorrow, became stronger with each trial. Meanwhile, Seth's rage grew. He knew Isis was hiding something, and he scoured Egypt with relentless suspicion. Yet no matter how far he searched, the goddess always remained a step ahead, aided by her cunning, her magic, and the compassion of the gods who still supported Osiris's cause. As Horus grew into childhood, he began to show signs of his destiny. He was strong, curious, and brave, often playing among the reeds while Isis watched carefully. Sometimes falcons circled overhead, a symbol of the power he would one day embody. The people who glimpsed him in secret spoke of a child whose eyes gleamed like the sun and whose presence carried a quiet strength. But his childhood was never without peril. Seth's forces struck whenever they caught wind of his location. Legends tell of nights when Horus was struck down by poison, only to be revived through Isis's relentless prayers and the assistance of Thoth, the wise god of knowledge. Each time he recovered, Horus grew stronger, as though the trials themselves were forging him into the warrior he was meant to be. The hidden childhood of Horus was not merely about survival, it was about preparation. In silence and secrecy, he learned patience. In suffering, he learned endurance. And in his mother's love, he learned compassion. These qualities would shape him into the champion of justice, the one who would rise against Seth and reclaim the throne that had been stolen. In the stillness of the marshlands, Isis would often whisper to her son about his father. She told him stories of Osiris, the just king, the bringer of life, and the one who now ruled the underworld. She told Horus that one day he must stand against Seth, not only for his father's memory, but for all of Egypt. And so the boy grew, sheltered in secrecy but destined for greatness. Every step he took, every breath he drew, was a step closer to the confrontation that would decide the fate of the gods and the balance of Egypt. The child Horus was no longer just a hidden boy in the marshes. He was becoming the falcon of the sky, the heir of Osiris, the hope of Egypt. The first battles of Horus and Seth the Nile lay quiet under the moonlight. Villages rested and the soft wind moved across the reeds. But in the world of the gods, a storm was rising. Horus, son of Osiris, was no longer a hidden child. He had grown, carrying the weight of his father's death and his mother's hopes. Now, the time had come to face Seth, the uncle who had stolen the throne of Egypt. Their first clash was not fought with armies. It was fought with strength, with will, and with the judgment of the gods. Seth, powerful and cruel, laughed when he saw Horus. "You are still too young," he said, his voice heavy like thunder over the desert. But Horus stood tall. His falcon eyes burned with calm resolve. He was not only a son seeking revenge, he was Egypt's rightful heir. The two struck with force. Horus moved quickly like the wings of a falcon. Seth struck heavily, like storms breaking against the desert rocks. Their blows echoed through the land, shaking both the river and the sand. In one fierce battle, Seth wounded Horus's eye. The pain was deep, and Horus fell to the ground. That eye, later known as the Eye of Horus, became a symbol of his suffering. But the wise god Thoth healed it, restoring not only sight but balance. From then on, the Eye of Horus would stand for protection, healing, and wholeness. Seth, too, was scarred in these battles. In some tellings, Horus struck him down, leaving him wounded and humiliated. In others, Seth turned into a giant red hippopotamus, thrashing in the Nile, while Horus soared above him, striking from the sky. The gods watched. Some whispered support for Horus, others feared Seth's strength. The struggle was not only on the battlefield but also in the halls of judgment. Again and again, the gods gathered to decide who should rule. Osiris, speaking from the underworld, called for justice. Seth argued with cunning words, claiming power through survival. But Horus did not bend. Wounded, tested, and scarred, he rose each time. His fight was not only for revenge, it was for balance. Egypt could not thrive in chaos. The Nile could not flow freely under Seth's storms. Only rightful kingship could bring peace. Their war became a story without end. Order against chaos, justice against force. And though the final decision was still far away, one truth had become clear. Horus would never stop. The boy who once hid in the marshes had become a warrior. His eye, once torn, now shone brighter. His spirit, once fragile, had grown unbreakable. Egypt waited, the gods listened, and the battles of Horus and Seth continued beneath the silent stars. The great judgment of the gods. The battles between Horus and Seth had lasted for years. Neither had fully won, and neither had fully lost. The gods grew tired of endless fighting, so they gathered to decide once and for all who should rule. The council of gods was vast. Ra, the sun god, sat in majesty. Thoth, the wise, carried his scrolls. Shu-Geb and many others filled the hall. Even Isis, the mother of Horus, came with her calm yet powerful presence. The question was simple, but the answer was heavy. Who should be king of Egypt? Seth stood first. His voice boomed across the chamber. "I am strong," he declared. "I am the protector of the sun god. Without me, chaos will rise. The desert belongs to me, and I alone can keep it under control." Many nodded in fear, for Seth was indeed strong. He had defended Ra's boat against the great serpent Apep, but others remembered his cruelty, his betrayal, and the blood of Osiris. Then Horus rose. His falcon eyes were calm. His voice was steady, not loud. "I am the son of Osiris," he said, "the rightful heir. Egypt does not need fear, it needs balance. My eye was taken, but it was healed. My heart has suffered, but it is whole. I seek not only to rule, but to restore." The gods murmured. Some favored Horus, others leaned toward Seth. To settle the matter, strange trials were arranged. In one trial, Horus and Seth raced in boats made of stone. Seth cheated, building his boat of wood painted to look like stone. He won for a moment, but when the truth was seen, the gods grew restless. In another trial, they turned into hippopotamuses and battled in the Nile for days. The waters churned, but neither could claim full victory. Then Isis, ever clever, disguised herself as a poor old woman. She spoke kindly to Seth, asking him if it was right for a son to inherit from his father. Without realizing who she was, Seth agreed. "Yes," he said, "the son is the heir." When Isis revealed herself, the gods laughed, but Seth grew furious, roaring like thunder. Still, the council hesitated. They feared Seth's strength but also admired his courage. Ra himself often leaned toward Seth, remembering the battles against Apep. The judgment dragged on, year after year. Meanwhile, Osiris from the underworld spoke to the gods through dreams and signs. He reminded them of truth and justice. He said that without rightful succession, Egypt would fall into chaos. And so, the council of the gods remained divided. The trials continued, the arguments repeated, and the fate of Egypt hung in silence. The battles of Horus and Seth were no longer only of weapons. They had become trials of words, tests of cleverness, and struggles of patience. For Egypt's destiny was not only in strength, but in judgment. The Nile flowed quietly as the gods debated, and mortals on earth waited for peace. The Council of Gods had argued for what felt like an eternity. The trials between Horus and Seth were endless, yet the question remained: who should be king of Egypt? The gods gathered once more in the great hall. Ra sat upon his throne, shining with the light of the sun. Thoth stood with his scrolls, ready to record the decision. Isis and Nephthys were present, their faces calm, but watchful. Even Osiris, though dwelling in the underworld, sent his voice through sacred visions. The council at last turned to Osiris for guidance. His voice was deep, steady, and filled with authority. "My son Horus," said Osiris, "is my rightful heir. No trick of Seth, no trial of stone boats, no words of anger can deny what is just. The throne belongs to Horus. Justice must be restored. Without justice, Egypt is lost." The gods listened in silence. The weight of Osiris's words was greater than all the noise of battle. Ra finally nodded, though slowly. "It is decided," he declared. "Horus shall be the king of Egypt. Seth will not sit upon the throne. Yet Seth shall not be cast aside, for his strength is needed. He will guard the sun boat at night, forever fighting the serpent Apep." Thus balance was created. Horus was given the throne, and Egypt gained a king who ruled with the spirit of his father. Seth, though defeated, was given a role that suited his power, one that kept him from destroying the world. Horus was crowned. The gods placed the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt upon his head, uniting the land once more. The falcon god stood tall, the symbol of kingship. The eye of Horus shone with protection and healing, a promise to the people of Egypt. Isis wept with joy, for her son had fulfilled his destiny. Nephthys stood beside her, quietly proud. The people of Egypt rejoiced, for peace had finally come after years of strife. The throne of Egypt, once stained by betrayal and grief, was now restored to harmony. The line of Osiris would continue, and pharaohs on earth would rule as living images of Horus, protectors of order and balance. But though the battles had ended, the story of the gods was not over. For in the world of myth, peace is never final, and balance must always be guarded. The Nile flowed on, calm and eternal, as Horus sat upon his father's throne. Egypt was whole again, whole. The journey of Ra. Across the sky. Every morning in ancient Egypt, the people looked eastward as the sun rose above the horizon. To them, this was not just the start of another day. It was the daily rebirth of the god Ra, the great sun god, father of order, light, and life. Ra's journey was endless. He rose in the east, crossed the heavens, and then descended in the west. When night fell, he traveled through the mysterious underworld before returning once more to the dawn. This cycle never stopped, for it was the heartbeat of the cosmos. Morning. Ra the child. At sunrise, Ra was seen as a young child, full of energy and promise. He rode in his great solar bark, a shining boat of light, accompanied by gods who served as crew and protectors. The morning air was cool, the Nile sparkled, and the people prayed to Ra to bless the fields and the waters. The goddess Ma'at, the personification of truth and balance, often stood in the boat. Her presence reminded the gods and humans alike that the world must remain in order. Without Ma'at, there would be chaos. Without order, the sun itself could not rise. Noon. Ra in his strength. By midday, Ra was in the prime of his power. He was the mighty ruler, shining down with warmth and authority. The people of Egypt worked in his light, building temples, tending crops, and living under his watchful eye. The falcon-headed god Horus sometimes merged with Ra in this phase, becoming Ra-Horakti. Ra, the Horus of the horizons. This fusion showed the connection between divine kingship and the sun's strength. Pharaohs on earth claimed this same power, declaring themselves sons of Ra. At this time of day, the solar bark was safest, for Ra's light drove away shadows and dangers. But the gods on board still remained alert, for they knew that the greatest trials came when the sun set. Evening. Ra the Elder. As the sun descended toward the western horizon, Ra grew old and weary. He became an elder god, full of wisdom but heavy with the weight of his journey. His golden light softened into orange and red, painting the sky with his fading strength. The people of Egypt saw this as a warning. The day was ending, and darkness approached. Yet they also knew it was not the end of Ra. It was only a passage into another stage of his eternal cycle. Night. Ra in the underworld. When the sun disappeared, Ra's journey entered its most dangerous phase. He traveled through the underworld, known as the Duat. His solar bark no longer sailed through open skies, but passed through deep, winding tunnels filled with shadows and spirits. In the Duat, Ra was not alone. Gods and guardians filled the boat to protect him. Among them was Seth, the very god who had once fought Horus for the throne. Though violent and unpredictable, Seth's strength was essential here, for he fought off the greatest enemy of Ra, the serpent Apep. The battle with Apep, also called Apophis, was a massive serpent of chaos. Each night, he tried to devour the sunboat and plunge the world into eternal darkness. His body stretched across the underworld, coiling through the waters of the Duat. When Apep attacked, the boat shook with fury. Darkness thickened, and all seemed lost. But the crew of gods fought back with chants, spells, and weapons of light. Seth stood at the front, striking the serpent with a great spear. Other gods recited spells to weaken Apep, binding him with chains of magic. The battle was fierce every single night, yet Ra always triumphed. The serpent was beaten back, not destroyed but subdued, waiting to rise again the next evening. Thus, the cycle of struggle repeated endlessly, the dawn of rebirth. As Ra's bark neared the end of the underworld, he was transformed. From the weary old god of sunset, he became young once more. At the eastern horizon, the scarab beetle god Khepri, symbol of renewal, rolled the sun upward, pushing it into the sky. Morning returned. Light spread across Egypt again, and the people rejoiced. Farmers began their work, priests offered prayers, and life continued. To the Egyptians, this cycle was more than a story. It was reassurance. Each day reminded them that light would always conquer darkness, that order would defeat chaos, and that even the longest night would end in dawn. Ra's journey was not about one victory, but about eternal balance. His fight with Apep never ended, yet that was the lesson. The world was safe because the struggle was constant. The gods never abandoned their duty, and the sun never failed to rise. Eternal repetition. And so it was, day after day, night after night. The same story, repeated endlessly. Ra's boat rising, shining, falling, and sailing through shadows. The serpent waiting, striking, and being defeated once again. The Egyptians believed that without this eternal repetition, nothing could exist. Time itself was shaped by the journey of Ra. The past, present, and future were bound together by the rhythm of the sun. As people lay down to sleep at night, they trusted that Ra would sail through the darkness, fight the serpent, and return. And when dawn came, their trust was rewarded with light, warmth, and life. The journey never ended. Journey through the underworld. When the sun slipped beyond the horizon each evening, the Egyptians believed Ra began a new and perilous voyage. This was not a voyage through the skies, but through the hidden places beneath the earth, the vast underworld known as the Duat. The journey of Ra was not one of peace. It was filled with danger, shadows, and great trials. Yet every night, Ra entered this world with courage. For if he did not, the sun would never rise again, and the balance of the world would be lost. The sunboat glided upon a black river that wound its way through 12 regions, called the 12 hours of the night. Each hour was guarded by spirits, gates, and creatures both protective and threatening. Ra was never alone on this journey. He was guided by deities who knew the paths of the underworld. Among them was Sia, the god of perception, who saw the way forward, and Heka, the god of magic, whose spells gave protection. But the most important guardian was Seth. Though known for his trickery and violence, Seth here had a noble purpose. Each night, he stood at the front of Ra's boat, spear in hand, ready to strike down the great serpent Apep. Apep was chaos itself, a serpent so vast it could coil around the world. It lurked in the waters of the underworld, waiting to strike Ra's boat. Every night, without fail, Apep tried to swallow the light of the sun. If it succeeded, the world would sink into eternal darkness. The boat moved hour by hour. At times it passed through fields where spirits rested. At other times, it was slowed by thick waters filled with demons. In the middle of the night, Ra and his crew entered the most dangerous realm where Apep attacked. The serpent rose from the dark waters, its body endless, its eyes glowing. It opened its mouth wide, ready to consume the boat. The gods shouted spells. Heka spoke words of binding. Sia guided Ra's light to weaken the serpent, and Seth, fierce and strong, drove his spear into Apep again and again. The battle shook the underworld. The serpent writhed, but it was never destroyed completely. Each night it was wounded and cast aside, yet it returned the next night to fight again. The struggle was endless. When dawn approached, the boat reached the final gate. Here, Ra was transformed into the form of Khepri, the scarab beetle, a symbol of rebirth. The gates opened, and light poured into the sky. The sun rose once more over Egypt, and the people rejoiced at the new day. Yet none could forget that Ra had faced darkness all night long. His victory was not only his own, it was the reason the world continued. The Egyptians saw this cycle as eternal. Just as the Nile rose and fell, and just as crops were planted and harvested, so too did the sun die and return each day. Ra's journey through the underworld was a reminder that even in the deepest night, light would come again. And so the story of Ra's nightly voyage continued, calm and unending, like the slow drift of the river, the weighing of the heart. The Egyptians believed that death was not an end, but a passage. When the body was laid to rest, the soul began its own long journey through the underworld. It was not a simple path. It was filled with gates, guardians, and trials, much like Ra's nightly voyage. Yet at the heart of this journey was the most important test of all, the weighing of the heart. When a soul entered the Hall of Judgment, it stood before Osiris, the god of the afterlife, who sat upon a throne of green stone. He wore the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, and in his hands he carried the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and order. At his side stood his sisters Isis and Nephthys, offering their protection. The soul was led forward by Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. Silent, watchful and calm, Anubis guided the soul to the great scales of truth. On one side of the scale lay the heart of the deceased. On the other side lay the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and justice. The heart was believed to hold the record of every action a person had ever taken. It remembered kindness, but it also remembered cruelty. It could not be tricked. The feather of Ma'at was pure, perfectly light, a symbol of the cosmic order that held the world together. As the scales settled, the gods looked on. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, stood nearby with his writing palette ready to record the result. The soul waited, silent as its fate was measured. If the heart balanced with the feather, the soul was declared pure. It was welcomed into the field of reeds, a perfect paradise where the dead lived much as they had in life, but without suffering. Fields were always green, water was always fresh, and families were reunited forever. But if the heart was heavy, weighed down by lies, cruelty, or wickedness, the fate was very different. The heart would be devoured by Ammit, a fearsome creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. Ammit was known as the devourer of the dead. Once she consumed a heart, the soul was erased forever. It was not tortured, it simply ceased to exist. This judgment was the core of Egyptian belief. It showed that life had meaning beyond the moment. Every act, no matter how small, left a mark upon the heart. Living in balance with Ma'at, living in truth, harmony, and justice, was the only way to secure eternity. The Egyptians took comfort in this system. They believed the universe was fair, that even kings could not escape judgment, and even the poor could be rewarded if their hearts were light. And so, each night when they closed their eyes, they trusted that the gods were watching, that the scales of truth were steady, and that if they lived with honesty, the path to the field of reeds would open. The weighing of the heart was not only a myth, but also a reminder. Live gently, live truthfully, live in balance with the world. Field of reeds. To the ancient Egyptians, paradise was not some faraway place of golden clouds or distant stars. Instead, it was something familiar, peaceful, and close to the life they already knew. They called it Aru, the field of reeds. The field of reeds was imagined as a perfect reflection of Egypt itself. The land was green, the rivers clear, and the skies always calm. Crops grew tall without effort. Harvests never failed, and water flowed endlessly through shining canals. Unlike in the mortal world, there were no floods to fear, no droughts to endure, and no hunger to suffer. When a soul passed the weighing of the heart, it entered this eternal paradise. The soul was young again, free of sickness and pain. Families were reunited, parents embraced children, and lost loved ones walked together once more. The Egyptians believed this reunion was one of the greatest joys of the afterlife. In the field of reeds, every person had a plot of land just as they did in life. But here, the land never withered. Fields of barley stretched endlessly, always ripe for harvest. Fruit trees bent under the weight of figs and dates, while lotus flowers floated on still ponds. The soul could fish in the clear waters of the Nile's mirror, hunt birds in the marshes, or simply rest in the warm sunlight. Every activity of daily life continued, but without hardship or loss. Work was light and joyful, not heavy or exhausting. The gods themselves were present in this paradise. Osiris ruled as king of the blessed dead, seated in eternal green fields. The souls lived in harmony with him, offering prayers and songs. To walk among the gods, to be near them, was considered the ultimate peace. And yet, the field of reeds was not only about joy, it was also about justice. Only those who lived truthfully in accordance with Ma'at could enter. This ensured that paradise remained pure. There was no room for cruelty or deceit, only for balance and truth. The Egyptians filled their tombs with amulets, food, and treasures, because they believed these things would be needed on the journey to this land. They even buried small figurines called shabti, magical servants who would come to life in the afterlife to help with farming and tasks. In the field of reeds, even service was gentle and kind. It was a paradise that reflected Egyptian hopes, not escape from the world, but perfection of it. A continuation of home, but without pain. To the Egyptians, eternity was not about leaving behind the earth, but about living forever in its most beautiful form. And so, when they looked at their fields, their rivers, and their sky, they saw not only their present life, but also a glimpse of what awaited them if their hearts were pure. The field of reeds was a dream of peace, an eternal Egypt where time was still, crops were golden, and the soul could rest at last. Tombs, rituals, and the Book of the Dead. For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an ending but a passage. It was the beginning of a journey, one that required careful preparation. This preparation took place long before the final breath, in rituals, tombs, and sacred texts. A tomb was more than a resting place for the body. It was a doorway between worlds. The Egyptians designed tombs as eternal homes for the soul, filled with everything the spirit might need in the afterlife. Food offerings, jars of wine, clothing, and tools were placed inside, along with treasures of gold and amulets for protection. Each item had a purpose. To the Egyptians, nothing was wasted. The walls of these tombs were painted with images of daily life, scenes of farming, fishing, banquets, and music. These paintings were not just decoration. They were believed to be magical, coming to life in the afterlife so that the soul could continue enjoying those same pleasures forever. The colors were soft yet bright, made from minerals that would endure for thousands of years. Central to this preparation was a text known today as the Book of the Dead. It was not one single book, but rather a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions written on papyrus scrolls. Each spell served as a guide, helping the soul overcome dangers on the path to the afterlife. Some spells gave the dead the ability to speak to the gods. Others offered words of power to repel demons or avoid traps. Still others provided knowledge of secret names, doorways, and magical gates. For the Egyptians, to know the right words was to hold the key to survival beyond death. The most famous of these spells described the weighing of the heart. It reminded the soul to speak the negative confession before Osiris, words declaring innocence of crimes like theft, murder, or dishonesty. The spell instructed the soul on how to speak with confidence, so the heart might remain light and pass the test. To make sure these words were remembered, families often placed the Book of the Dead in the tomb, tucked beside the mummy. Sometimes the scrolls were beautifully illustrated with detailed pictures of gods, boats, and strange underworld creatures. Each picture acted as a visual reminder of the soul's path. Amulets, too, were placed on and inside the wrappings of the mummy. The scarab beetle amulet was among the most important. It symbolized rebirth and transformation, reminding the gods that the soul should rise again, like the scarab rolling the sun across the sky. Priests played a key role in these preparations. They performed the opening of the mouth ceremony, a ritual that symbolically restored the senses of the dead. With this act, the spirit could breathe, speak, see, and hear in the afterlife. Without the ceremony, the soul would be silent and powerless. Every detail mattered. From the direction of the tomb to the alignment of the sarcophagus, from the offering tables to the carved prayers on the walls, everything was arranged with care. To the Egyptians, this was not superstition but sacred duty. It was how one ensured a safe passage into eternity. Through these tombs, rituals, and texts, the Egyptians showed their deep belief that life and death were part of one unbroken cycle. The dead were not gone. They were simply traveling onward, carrying with them the tools of life into a new and eternal world. And so, each tomb stood as both a memory and a promise. A memory of a life once lived and a promise of a life yet to come. The journey through the underworld. The Egyptians imagined the afterlife not as a single place, but as a long and challenging journey. When a person died, their soul began a passage through the Duat, the mysterious underworld. The Duat was vast, stretching beneath the earth and beyond the horizon, hidden in darkness and mystery. The journey was not simple. It was filled with gates, rivers, and dangerous beings. Each stage had to be passed carefully, often by speaking the right words or presenting the correct offering. Without these, the soul might be lost forever. The Duat was divided into regions, sometimes described as 12 hours of the night. Each hour represented a stage of the sun, god Ra's nightly voyage. Just as Ra traveled through the darkness to rise again at dawn, so too did the soul of the dead travel through the Duat to be reborn in the afterlife. At the first gate, the soul was met by guardians. These guardians were strange beings, part human, part animal, sometimes with fiery serpents coiled around them. Each had a secret name. The soul could only pass if it spoke the correct name or recited the spell written in the Book of the Dead. If the soul failed, the gate would remain closed and the journey would end. Beyond the gates were rivers of fire and lakes of water. Some waters were peaceful and life-giving, while others were deadly, burning anyone who touched them. The soul needed guidance to choose the safe path. Sometimes divine ferrymen offered passage across these waters, but only if the soul knew how to address them with respect. In the deeper regions of the Duat, terrifying creatures lurked. Giant snakes, scorpion-headed demons, and crocodile-like beasts waited to test the courage of the dead. Yet the Egyptians did not imagine these monsters as purely evil. Instead, they were challenges, barriers meant to prove the strength and purity of the soul. One of the greatest dangers was the serpent Apophis, the eternal enemy of the sun. Every night, Apep tried to stop Ra's boat, swallowing light and plunging the world into chaos. The gods, with their spears and spells, fought beside Ra to defeat the serpent. To the Egyptians, this battle repeated every night, ensuring that the sun would rise again. By joining Ra's journey, the soul too shared in this victory. As the hours passed, the soul moved closer to the Hall of Judgment. But even before reaching it, the soul encountered magical landscapes, fields of reeds where spirits rested, mountains filled with doors and shadows, caverns lit by eternal flames. Each place was both fearful and sacred, reminding the soul of the delicate balance between order and chaos. The Book of Gates and the Amduat, two other sacred texts, described these regions in great detail. They told of gods who stood watch at each doorway, demanding secret passwords. They described lakes guarded by deities with the heads of lions or falcons, and caverns where the stars themselves rested before returning to the night sky. Through it all, the soul carried hope. If it stayed pure, remembered the spells, and honored the gods, it would reach the final dawn. At that moment, the soul would emerge into the light of the eastern horizon, just as Ra rose again at sunrise. This journey through the Duat was not meant to frighten, but to prepare. The Egyptians believed that life itself was a rehearsal for the afterlife. To live with balance, to respect Ma'at, and to honor the gods. These were the ways to ensure safe passage through darkness. At the end of the journey, the soul would stand before the scales of justice, where its heart would be weighed. That moment, the great test, awaited all. And so, the Egyptians saw the underworld not as a place of despair, but as a path of trials. It was the road every soul must walk, a mirror of the sun's eternal voyage, promising that after night, there would always be the weighing of the heart. At the end of the long journey through the Duat, every soul came to the most important place of all, the Hall of Two Truths. Here, the final judgment took place, deciding whether a person would live forever in peace, or whether their existence would end. The Egyptians believed that the heart was the seat of memory, conscience, and truth. Unlike the brain, which they often removed during mummification, the heart was carefully preserved. For it was the heart, not the mind, that would be weighed before the gods. In the great hall stood Osiris, the lord of the underworld. He was shown as a god wrapped like a mummy, wearing the tall white crown of Upper Egypt, with green skin symbolizing life and rebirth. By his side were Isis and Nephthys, his faithful sisters, who offered comfort to the dead. Around them gathered 42 divine judges, each representing a different aspect of justice. The heart of the soul was placed upon a golden scale. On the other side of the balance lay the feather of Ma'at. This feather was no ordinary feather. It was the symbol of truth, justice, and the order that kept the universe in harmony. If the heart was light, balanced with the feather, it meant the person had lived with honesty and respect for Ma'at. Such a soul would be welcomed into the afterlife, free to live forever in the eternal fields of peace. But if the heart was heavy, weighed down with lies, cruelty, or selfishness, the balance would tip. Waiting beside the scale was a terrifying creature named Ammit. She was part crocodile, part lion, and part hippopotamus, the three deadliest animals known to Egypt. Ammit was called the devourer of souls. If the scales showed guilt, Ammit would consume the heart, destroying it forever. This was the second death, far worse than the first, for it meant complete non-existence. The soul would vanish, forgotten for eternity, denied the joys of the afterlife. To prepare for this moment, Egyptians filled their tombs with spells from the Book of the Dead. These spells acted as guides and prayers, helping the soul speak the right words. One of the most important was called the negative confession. In this, the soul would declare innocence before the gods, saying, "I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not lied, I have not caused pain." In all, 42 declarations were made, one for each judge. The ritual was not only about punishment, it was about balance. A person who lived with Ma'at in their heart had nothing to fear. To them, the weighing was simply proof of their purity. The Egyptians believed that justice was universal. No king, no commoner, no priest could escape the scales. All were equal before Osiris. When a heart passed the test, the soul was welcomed by Osiris himself. The gods rejoiced, and the person was led into the field of reeds. This was a vision of paradise, a perfect reflection of Egypt itself, with endless crops, flowing waters, and eternal sunshine. There, families reunited, and the blessed dead lived in happiness forever, farming, fishing, and feasting without end. For the Egyptians, this vision of judgment carried comfort. Death was not the end, but a continuation. Life was weighed not by wealth or power, but by truth and kindness. To live with Ma'at meant to live forever. And so the weighing of the heart became one of the most famous images of Egyptian belief. A scale, a feather, a heart, and the gods watching in silence. The test was simple, yet eternal. Live justly, and eternity would be yours. The field of reeds, eternal afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, the reward for a good and balanced life was not a vague dream, but a clear and beautiful place. They called it the field of reeds, or in their own words, Aru. It was their vision of heaven, and it reflected everything they loved about their homeland. Imagine the wide, shining Nile stretching forever, its waters calm and full of fish. Along its banks, tall green reeds swayed gently in the breeze. Fields of golden grain grew without end, never needing to be planted, never failing to ripen. Fruit trees bent low with sweetness. The air was warm but never harsh, and the sun always shone with a gentle glow. This was not an abstract paradise. It was Egypt made perfect. The farmers who had toiled in life now reaped harvests without pain. The fishermen always caught their nets full. The herds of cattle and flocks of geese never grew thin. Every task that had once been hard was now effortless, turning into joy. But the afterlife was not only about work. Families reunited in the field of reeds. Husbands and wives, parents and children, even friends long lost in time were brought together again. They lived in beautiful homes, shaped like the houses they had known in life, but filled with endless comfort. The Egyptians did not believe in sitting still for eternity. To them, eternal life was a continuation of earthly life. but without hunger, without sickness, and without fear. A man might still plow his fields, but his plow would never break. A woman might weave cloth, but her loom would never tire her hands. Life continued, but in harmony and joy. To reach the field of reeds, the soul needed to pass the weighing of the heart. Once the heart proved pure, the blessed spirit crossed the final waters and entered the eternal land. Osiris, Lord of the afterlife, welcomed them, and they joined the company of the righteous. Some Egyptians believed that in paradise, the soul could even serve the gods. For this reason, they placed small figurines called ushabti in tombs. These tiny statues were shaped like workers and inscribed with magic words. In the afterlife, if Osiris or the gods called upon a soul to perform a task, the ushabti would rise to life and do the work in their place. In this way, the deceased enjoyed freedom and rest while still showing loyalty to the divine order. The field of reeds was a place of balance. It reflected Ma'at, the principle of truth and harmony. Just as Egypt's survival depended on the balance of the Nile's flooding and the cycles of nature, so too did eternity depend on balance in the soul. Those who lived in kindness and truth would dwell in everlasting peace. The Egyptians found deep comfort in this vision. Death was not a frightening unknown. It was a journey home, to a land more beautiful than even the greenest banks of the Nile, a place where harvests never failed, where families never broke apart, and where life was eternal, golden, and calm. And so when they built their tombs, painted their walls, and filled their coffins with prayers, they were not preparing for darkness. They were preparing for the light of the field of reeds. To close their eyes in this world was simply to awaken in another, an Egypt without end.